All right. Baruch Hashem. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable before you, God, my strength, my Redeemer. We had a beautiful Farbringen last night. Unfortunately, the audio wasn't so good. If you want to listen to the Farbringen, you'll need to use some type of tool or something, that will help you get that out and, working with the video and things like that. But if you can use a tool and double the audio, it'll be great for you. We were talking about the cosmic power of marriage, and we were following up. In the previous weeks, we've been talking about how marriage, there's three different phases. There's a person who desires to get married or is getting married, and then there is the person who is married, and then there's the people that are at the stage and the age where they're marrying off their children. And we're talking about marriage being a consummate soliloquy of our relationship with God and the Jewish people, and etc. Mamish. We were talking last night about how this cosmic sequence of marriage and how amazing that it is when these two souls who are just literally one descend into earth, and they're back to back. And we've been talking about all these things and how it literally takes us back to Gan Eden. And we were talking about how the Friedeker Rebbe was married on the 13th of Elul, which is today. And every time that we're studying and we're learning, we're bringing back that energy and that vitality into where we're holding by right now, that it's not just a commemoration or a memory, but the energy is being unlocked even right now. Let's go on just a little bit more. Let's learn in the Sichos in English. I want to send out a special shot to the Tzaddikim group and dedicate this learning to them from the Theodore Jason studio, also Rabbi Svi Schwartz in Miami, Florida. All of us, we had the very first week of school here, and I think in a lot of your communities too. May you all be blessed and well and able to transition nicely, get into our routines. Let's look at the key to prosperity, Sichos in English, Kitavo. Number 3, we thank you for all the Sephardim doing the Slikot also nicely, and may this learning of the Chassidut be elevated in all of us together, Klal Yisrael. We even say L'chaim in this moment. So we're talking about in the Talmud and Tanis 2a and b that Rabbi Yochanan said that there's 3 keys that are held in the hand of the Holy One, blessed be He, which are not transmitted to an agent. This is interesting, as we were also studying in the sound the shofar and the keys that are given to Tzaddikim. These keys of rain, the keys of life, and the key of resurrection of the dead. Now, regarding the key of rain, it's written in the book of Deuteronomy, 28th chapter, 12th verse, that God will open for you His treasure store of good, the heavens, to give rain to your land in its season. And in the west, Eretz Yisrael, they say the key of sustenance is also in God's hand, as it is written in the book of Psalms 145:16, that you open your hand and satisfy the desire of every living being, as we would say it in the Hebrew, as Paseach, Ashidecha, and we, as we say that with such great intention, and the fact that you open your hand, not that God has a hand, but this is the way that we see the hand of God in our life. One time I was in the park, and I remember I had an outrageously large amount of bread. Okay, so I take the bread, and I thought, what it may have been, 8, 9, 10 bags of all this bread that we were fortunate to have in the house. And the kids and I, we go to the park, and I'm thinking, I start handing out the bread to these ducks, and quickly there were more ducks than what I had, even having so much. And the way that God's hand opens it up, and He satiates the desire of every living being. So in the west, this Eretz Yisrael, which is the land of godliness, what we've been talking about previously, how sometimes there's a blessing in the place, and how sometimes geographically it's there, and then sometimes how when we come, we bring the blessing. So the key of sustenance being in the hand in Eretz Yisrael, and this teaching speaks to all of us because we all need and desire sustenance. And the Rebbe focuses on this universal concern in this Sikha, in this talk that follows, outlining the approach we should take to earning our livelihood as encapsulated by the verse. And going back a little bit further into Deuteronomy in the 15th chapter, 18th verse, and it says here that God will bless you in all that you do. We were talking about the concept of how when we do something that it allows God to, it's not just like we sit and receive. When we do, it consummates this relationship and causes a friction that brings down godly light. And as we create this friction, this relationship melts together. And this is mamish the messianic era that we are all striving to approach. Now, Judaism, even in right now as we speak now, Judaism teaches that the verse emphasizes that we must do, okay? We must labor within the context of our physical world to earn what we need to live. However, while doing, we must realize that all we're doing is creating a conduit for God's blessing, lest our hearts go astray and we think that it is by our efforts and by our will that these things are coming to us, and it's just merely a conduit or a vessel. This concept of keli, this claim, this vessel that we make for God because God blesses us in a natural way. He doesn't just use these the way that our world is set up. It's natural. So we have to set up a conduit, a vessel, the keli, and there's several ways for us to understand this concept and live accordingly. One approach views our efforts in the natural order as having no independent existence, which is a concept, and everything we do, like to borrow a phrase from the book of Isaiah in the 10th chapter, 15th verse, it's saying that an axe in the hand of the wood chopper, okay? So we're no more than the axe in the hand of the wood chopper, and is no more than a medium through which God can channel his blessings. And nevertheless, since God commanded that we create a conduit for our livelihood within the prevailing natural order, that order acquires a certain standing in our minds, and God created the world and with a given structure, and he desires that we live and work within that context. As such, the structure of the natural order deserves a measure of significance. So the vernacular of the CHASSIDUS in the approach follows the pattern determined by light, that is mamali kolam, and which is God's light that permeates all the worlds, emanating even inside according to that pattern. Although everything emanates from God, he has endowed the world with a structure that defines its existence. Continuing along here, according to a loftier approach, we can recognize and conduct our lives with the awareness that just as in a miraculous series of events, it is patently evident and apparent that laws of nature are of no substance at all, so too can that truth be recognized even when God's beneficence is conveyed through the garments of nature. We may labor using different conduits for God's blessings. However, the conduits resemble the containers that Elisha in 2 Kings, Elisha, the 4th chapter, 2nd verse, advised the widow of Avadia to employ when working the miracle to provide her with sustenance. It did not matter which type of container that she used. All that was important was that she had a container into which the oil would miraculously flow. God is speaking to you right there. So this vernacular in the Chassidut, again, this approach reflects God's light that is sovev kol amim. Before we're talking about the mamali, which permeates all the worlds, and sovev, which is God's light that encompasses all the worlds. Although this light can be manifest in this material world, it is manifest without a pattern or structure, since its purpose is to communicate how God is utterly defined, undefined, and unlimited. So a third and even loftier approach inspires us to live with absolute faith that everything comes solely from God, and simultaneously to recognize that this means everything. Not only the beneficence granted to us, but also the natural order itself and our actions within it. We have a saying in Arizona, it's like easy money, no honey, but easy money. We know that our avodah, our work, it's not always so easy. Please join us with the introduction to the Perkei Avos, even very soon here. But when it comes to a concept of work is not mamish supposed to be easy, but we toil inside of it, and this is the formula for our existence, and may we all be blessed to receive it. In the Perkei it says that we should abhor taking high office, but love work. And I was discussing with my chavrusa the other day. I said, so why would God have to command us to love work? Because it's not so easy to love work. It's not so desirable when we're in the heat. It's not so desirable when we have pain. No pain, no gain. These things are not fun. Who wants to preach this message? Who wants to live this message? But we decided that this was the greater plan, and this is what God has, and this is how God is bringing down his light into the world through this Dira Bitachtonim, which we've been talking about in these different concepts. If you're new to joining in, please continue along. Thank you, and just listening in, and we learn where we're at for that point, and we grow and continue to grow from there. So this third loftier approach, which we're talking about, it inspires us to live with absolute faith, okay? That everything comes solely from God, and simultaneously to recognize that it's everything, not just the good that's granted to us, but the natural order itself and the actions within it and the parts that are concealed that we may not be understanding through the necessity to work within the natural orders, not because it has any importance in and of itself, but solely because God desires that we employ it. There's this concept that we bring down out of the book of Eov and Job, where he's talking about like these, our righteousness is nothing to God, just rags. But even our sins, these things are nothing. We're talking about to the point where we were even talking about in the marriages last night, how the two people, this Chachma and Bina, how we have these husbandly and these masculine character traits and this understanding, and how this spark that comes from the man and the woman takes and grows it, and how that they're not separate, and as they're almost mamish useless beside one another, besides the fact that they work together. And the way we work together is by not having an existence and by nullifying ourselves. If the woman does not allow that spark to come inside, if the man is not allowed to let this nurturing and this nourishment process comes along, then the outcome is never granted. So this is solely because God desires that we employ it. Nevertheless, the channels through which God's blessings flow involve divine design. And this is where we're continuing to talk about this concept of Hashgacha Pratis. If you're new to the thing, it's called divine providence. And we've learned in the previous weeks that there's a natural form and order of divine Hashgacha Pratis. Our teacher, the Baal Shem Tov, teaches us that every wind, every leaf that's in the wind as it moves, it's by God's will that it moves, but it goes in a natural way. But there's something called Panimi Hashgacha Pratis, which is the inner face and the inner revealed. When we just trust in God and depend, it allows God to act in an unnatural way. And we have that ability in ourselves and in everything that we do. So this approach reflects the manifestation of God's essence, that he is neither finite nor transcendent, but expresses himself in both modes. As such, the conduits man uses to channel God's blessings to the world take on a certain significance. We still want to move on from it. It seems like every time that I speak, we're bringing out this right now, the time of the king is in the field, and we've learned, and we're going back and reviewing how previously, for us to have an endeavor with the king, we would need to be very well vetted and have a story and be so flawless and have the aptitude and capacity to sit inside of a king's chamber if we were able to get inside, which is a period of vetting and a period of being so magnanimous in our existence that you have to be flawless to be in these circles sometimes. But right now, as the king is in the field, the concept that we're talking about is when God, as we crown him as the king of the world, there's an analogy that we've been using. And the analogy is that, Daddy, Abba, Tati, he's in the home, and he has the children, the Kinderlock, and Daddy's down on the ground, and he's playing, toys with the kids, with the baby dolls, with the cars, vroom, 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 and we're completely subsumed inside of this world as a daddy or a Tati or a mommy or whatever that the case may be. But then when real life comes in, a business call, or maybe the baby wakes up, so mommy has to change what she's doing, then we get up and we exit that. I don't know if the word is existential, this non-existent, this world of illusion that we've completely vested ourselves in, and we go to another thing. And the point is that God does not have to do that. This is this concept of this mamali kol almin and this sovev kol almin, the fact that for God to become the king of the world, he has to sit down and play on the ground like it's toys. And how the fact that God created this whole existence, because we weren't able to exist in the face and the light of God. So God had to refine and pull back and contract. And we were talking about previously, still reviewing about how sometimes when things contract that we thought it was a bad thing. And when there's like light and God pulls it back, you would think, oh man, God's pulling out the stops and something bad is about to happen, but he's preparing it for good. The difference also, God, he doesn't have to, when he stands up, he doesn't have to subsume or exit that reality. He's able to be in both, Sovev and Mamali Kol Almin. He can have these two manifestations being absolutely transcendent, but with inside of nature as well. This approach enables us to appreciate that even the natural dimensions of our existence are but a series of miracles. Let's see if we can just touch on this for a few minutes. The key to prosperity. Grateful to be able to do the learning, and we should all walk up right into the essence of to this material era. If you were only able to join until now, I really thank you for your time and grateful for the sacrifice that you made. And may the words of my mouth and meditation of my heart be acceptable before you, God, my strength and my redeemer. Otherwise, let's go on. And it's saying our sustenance and reign identical, because we're talking about these three keys in the Talmud, tying these to A and B. And we see this also in Deuteronomy 7:6 and slight changes in there, that the three keys are held in the hand of the Holy One. Blessed be he, and we're not transmitted to an agent. They are the key of reign, the key of life, which is children, and the key of resurrection of the dead. This the key is Hamaisim. And this is the order in which the keys are mentioned. In this version of the Talmud, however, it's the order is life, reign, and the resurrection of the dead in other places, and the order found in Sanhedrin 113a. And this order also reflects the sequence of the proof texts that are in their sources. And it's saying that the Endeavorim Rabbah, the order is the resurrection of the dead, which is the barrenness and reign. In the Midrash of the book of Psalms, the order is the opening of the womb, with its just life and the resurrection of the dead and reign. And there's other sources. It goes like burial, reign. That's not what we're talking about so much here. We do want to go ahead and recap on the fact that we're talking about what this Tekiyas Hameisim and the resurrection of the dead, and how we've spoke about previous, how do that affects these things, and the fact that when we desire them and our whole existence and being is that, so we focus on what God wants, not just what we want. There's like a pleasure and a joy that we get, especially with the Tekiyas Hameisim and this era of messianic redemption, that we should be able to please God, see our loved ones again, and that we should be able to walk upright into that. But the main thing is that it is the will of God, not only for like, if we serve God for a reward, or if we serve God out of love and awe and fear. And we're talking about in this month of Elul how we're polishing our buttons. And there was a story of the soldiers, how they, would scrub the buttons of their clothing, and they use like sand and grit to make it shine and polish. But sometimes our tears and our slichot and our asking of forgiveness and our being open with ourselves with the King in this month of Elul is what cleans our inside of our soul and brings us close to godliness, to be able to receive a judgment and a light for a whole new year, which affects our sustenance in this world. Regarding the key of rain, it is written, God will open for you his treasure store of good, the heavens to give rain to your land in its season. In the west, Eretz Israel, they say the key of the sustenance is also in God's hand, as we see in the book of Psalms, 145th chapter, 16th verse. You open your hand and you satiate the desire of every living being. And as we just focus intently on the fact and envision God's hand opening to us, what is the reason that Rabbi Yochanan did not include that the key of sustenance? Were he to have been asked this question, he would have responded, rain is also sustenance. So on the surface, it appears that Rabbi Yochanan was making a general statement, therefore he did not specify substance, for as a whole, rain is also sustenance, since as Rashi and Tanis and Geshanim and Yaakov and Bach's version, seeds and plants and fruits grow because of rain enabling the world to derive sustenance. In Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, this EY, by contrast, the scholars were more focused on details and there could be like a contradiction, but in the Talmud Bavli, perhaps in the Talmud Yerushalmi, how that's brought down, but we're not going into a deep analysis right there, but we'll make note of that for those who are familiar. And counted sustenance as a separate key. It's always challenging because we have such, with this method, a lot of the people prefer not to teach because they can't see who they're speaking with, and we want the message to be directly applicable, but we're grateful for the Lubavitcher Rebbe and the words, how it can touch the most advanced student or even those who are very first time hearing these concepts. So although as a whole rain is the source for the sustenance of the world, nevertheless, since there are forms of sustenance that are not dependent upon rain, they counted sustenance separately. Now conversely, there are rains that are not directly connected to sustenance, i.e. they do not descend in an appropriate measure. According to Mishnah and Gemara, Tanis 18b and 19a, to enable seed plants and fruits to grow on them. Moreover, it is possible that there are times when rain is not desired. Therefore, the scholars of Eretz Israel considered sustenance as a distinct key. So nevertheless, the straightforward wording of the Talmud, what is the reasoning that Rabbi Yochanan did not include that the key of sustenance does not reflect this understanding? Rather, the simple reading of the text implies that there is a difference of opinion and that there are two varying approaches regarding this matter. Now, clarifying Rabbi Yochanan's position. Number two, it's possible to explain the premise for the difference of opinion by first clarifying an issue raised by the commentaries. Parshas Darachim Derish 21. Regarding the response of the Talmud that according to Rabbi Yochanan, rain is also sustenance. The commentaries note that Rabbi Yochanan himself is quoted later in that tractate as saying in Gemara Tanis 9a, rain falls for the sake of an individual, while sustenance is granted, pardon me, for the sake of many. One moment, please. Dang, sorry about that. L'chaim. So rain falling for the sake of an individual, as it is written, the book of Deuteronomy, 28th chapter, 12th verse. God will open for you his treasure, store of good, the heavens, to give rain to your land, in these singular, and sustenance is granted for the sake of many, as we see in the book of Exodus, 16th chapter, 4th verse, behold, I will cause bread to rain down from the heavens for you. In a more plural sense, the way it is written in the Hebrew. Now, thus, we see that Rabbi Yochanan himself considers rain and sustenance as two separate matters. It is possible to explain this based on Rashi's interpretation of the Talmudic passage in this Gemara Ta'anis, that rain falls for the sake of an individual. If only one person requires rainfall, for example, he sowed his field after all others did, or he lives in a city inhabited entirely by non-Jews, and he requires rain. rain will fall in his merit. Now, sustenance refers to an abundance of goodness and food for the entire world. It will not be granted to the world in the merit of one person, but only for the sake of many. And if many need abundance, that blessings be manifest in the grain. The Holy One, blessed be he, will do so if they are worthy. However, if an individual needs that this grain be blessed, the Holy One, blessed be he, will not change the judgment of the year. Instead, his field will produce according to the blessings allotted for it, although he will cause rain to fall for the sake of an individual to improve his crops so that they will not be worse than those of others. He will not bless that person's field that it yield abundantly. Hopefully we can receive it. According to this interpretation and that source, the term sustenance, okay, this it's parnasa, if I'm correct, implies a unique and abundant flow of divine blessing. Now, speaking of that, when we have the concept, we were just learning here recently, when we ask for a blessing, we're talking about freeing up this pre-existing flow and channel that is within inside a person. It's not, it could be, it's not a creation of a new something. Like if you have the opportunity to bless someone, it's not based upon your merit, it's based upon what's already inside of that person. Sometimes we feel that we're not worthy and acceptable to bless someone else, but this is a fallacy, that what's inside of the person is just being unlocked and revealed and brought out as we bless one another. So in that source, the term sustenance implies a unique and abundant flow of divine blessing, as such is understood that only in this way should sustenance and rain be considered as two separate matters. And in this Kadushia Gados, the author Maharsha explains that this passage, that rain is merely a catalyst necessary for sustenance that is granted from heaven according to the pattern of nature, and if an individual requires rain, it may be granted in his merit. However, sustenance that comes directly from heaven in a miraculous manner, like the manna or the well of Miriam, when we talked about the manna, how it came from above, will only be granted for the sake of many. Sometimes it desired that the people would have to go a little distance to get it based upon whatever that their worthiness. It maybe be at their door. They had to take a step or a few more steps, but everyone had the capacity, and it was for the sake of many. And on this basis, back inside, it's saying here that it's possible to explain the difference between the approaches of this Rabbi Yochanan and the scholars of Eretz Yisrael. That Rabbi Yochanan, who maintains that rain is also sustenance, is referring to ordinary sustenance, not sustenance of a unique, abundant nature, or to sustenance that comes directly from heaven in an open, miraculous manner. By contrast, the scholars of Eretz Yisrael, who consider sustenance as a category of its own, are speaking about sustenance that requires God granting unique beneficence. Such sustenance is only given for the sake of many. Nevertheless, the question raised by the Talmud, what is the reason that Rabbi Yochanan did not include this key of sustenance as parnasa, still applies even according to this explanation. And why does Rabbi Yochanan only speak about ordinary sustenance that is included in rainfall? And thus there are only three keys held solely by God. He does not speak about the key on which sustenance that is not included in rainfall depends. Certainly, it is a key of its own, a type of beneficence that comes only from God. The key for it was not entrusted to an agent. Now, God's gifts of man input. Number 3, therefore, it seems appropriate. Wish I had that safer close to us. This sound a great shofar, because I want to review what these keys that are given to tzaddikim, because typically they're not even given to angels, but the tzaddikim in our Rebbes, they are given these keys somehow, and we'll have to go back and review that. It's not the time that we're talking about that right now. Therefore, it seems appropriate to say that Rabbi Yochanan and the scholars of Eretz Yisrael are speaking about the same type of sustenance. Their difference is abstract. Does sustenance require a separate key, or is it included in the key of rainfall to explain rain and sustenance, or both terms used in a general sense to refer to the wherewithal granted man for his food and other needs? The difference between them is that the rain refers to the granting of the sustenance from above, as indicated by the verse in Vayikra, the book of Leviticus 26, chapter 4th verse. I will grant your rains in their season. By contrast, sustenance as a whole refers to man's acceptance of this beneficence, including the activities he performs, so that he will be sustained and nurtured by his beneficence. Stated plainly, rain comes from above and causes plants to grow. By contrast, sustenance results from work and activity on man's part. He plows, sows, reaps, and the like. According to this understanding, the difference of opinion between Rabbi Yochanan and the scholars of Eretz Israel can be explained as follows: that Rabbi Yochanan is speaking about the keys for the blessings as they come directly from God the giver. Therefore, he mentions rain and not sustenance, because sustenance is not beneficence that comes directly from God. Instead, it involves man's work, the efforts he must invest to receive the benefit from God's beneficence. By contrast, the scholars of Eretz Israel speak from the perspective of man. The recipient, it is through his work that God's gift of beneficence becomes sustenance. Therefore, they include sustenance as one of the keys. There's a great story, not that all of us could be great Hasidic masters, the concept that we're trying to think, what a small segue, is the fact that, if some of us are so caught up in the toil, and we should be, but sometimes we get so caught up in the toil that it comes a point where our efforts are not affecting the outcome, as God is blessing us for a year on this Rosh Hashanah at this new year. Not how necessarily in contrast to no matter what you do will you be able to change this, but there's a story of, I think it's the Alter Rebbe or the Baal Shem Tov, and him and his disciples are going around, and they're learning, and they're in this deep devikas of great spirit of prayer, but they still needed to support themselves. So the teacher, he goes off and he knocks on the door, but they keep walking, and they're like completely astounded by this. They're like, "Hey, what happened?" You know what I'm saying? Like, why'd you just do that? Because sometimes you have to ask your teacher what they're doing, So they keep walking, and then whoever lived in the house, he runs all the way up the street to catch them after some time and give them parnasah, this sustenance, to give them a bag of money. And as we do our part, the point is that God does his part. All we have to do is make the structure for this blessing, and as we toil, it could even be greater, but there comes a point when we have to just apply this formula that God has made in this revealed world, and with the abilities that he made us, that we do not necessarily desire to be in that system, which is just completely mind-boggling and amazing, and the purpose of our creation that God has made for his glory, however that it may be. Based on this explanation, okay, we can understand the correspondence between these positions and the number of keys. Let's see if we can go 10 more minutes. 3 according to Rabbi Yochanan, and 4 according to the scholars of Eretz Israel, where they talk about the key of rain, the key of sustenance. There's 4 keys for them in the West, per se, whatever that this is saying here. The distinction between 3 associated with the letter Gimel, Aleph Beis Gimel, and 4 associated with the Aleph Beis Gimel Dalet is highlighted by the Gemara in the Talmud, Shabbos 104a, encapsulated into this expression Gamol Dalim, which is show kindness to the poor. And the letter Gimel refers to one who initiates the bestowal of beneficence, the one who shows Gomel, kindness. And the letter Dalet points to the poor, this Dalim, as we've seen and heard previously. For you, this might not be your first time hearing that, it may be. And the recipient of the beneficence, sometimes when someone asks you for something, you don't like that position. How much more so where you have to be in the position to ask yourself, you want to be a person who gives, or you want to be a giver or a receiver? Both are by far just great and awesome. And we should all have the ability to see what the more blessed version to our eyes would be, and not only see the inner, more concealed part of it. He who asks, this is a great thing, This relates to the numerical equivalents of these letters as 3 and 4. 3 reflects giving, the perspective of the one who grants kindness, while 4 also emphasizes the perspective of the recipient, who is the poor. And the function of an intermediary. Number 4 explanation is nevertheless still necessary. The passage focuses on the keys held in the hand of the Holy One, blessed be he, that were not transmitted to an agent. In other words, the matters dependent on these keys are such that they come directly from God without any intermediary. If so, the interpretation of the scholars of Eretz Israel, who consider sustenance as an independent key, requires clarification, since sustenance is considered an independent key because it depends on and relates to man's work, and therefore it is not an element of the key of rainfall. How then can it be described as a key held in the hand of the Holy One, blessed be he, and not entrusted to an agent? This can be understood by first clarifying the statement of our sages who explain why God ordained the rain descend from above. And we learn this in Genesis 13, chapter 9 verse, and the Rabbah that's there, and in other places, Tama Yerushalami Tanis 3:3. One of the reasons they give is so that everyone's eyes will focus heavenward. Isn't that beautiful? Having to look upward makes one's existence, makes you aware that man's sustenance is dependent upon rain that comes from above and does not come from a factor that man can bring about. That realization leads to the recognition that man's entire sustenance and livelihood, not only rain, come from God himself. And may we be able to see that analogy and that similarity and apply it in our life, and remember and bring down godliness also. By contrast, in Mitzrayim and Egypt, where the irrigation of the fields was dependent on the Nile and was watered by foot, so we see in Deuteronomy 11:11 and Lakute Sichos volume 6, so watered by foot refers to the process through which the flow from the Nile to the fields was controlled by breaking down dirt ridges. Interesting, that channel the water between the larger and smaller irrigation channels. This was usually done by foot. Very interesting. Alternatively, by foot is interpreted as meaning physically carrying water from the Nile to these irrigation channels. By canals, there was no necessity to look heavenward, very interestingly enough. In Mitzrayim in Egypt, there was a different kind of thing. And all of us inside of our constriction, we may be thought more to use our feet and kick down into the analogies that are brought there. And this is the advantage of Eretz Israel over the other lands. They are very close to one another, by the way. Let's make it just a few more pages. The Holy One, blessed be he, provides water for Eretz Israel by himself, while he provides the rest of the entire world with water via an agent. Tanis Tene, and in Eretz Israel, it's overtly apparent that the bestowal of beneficence from above comes solely from God. By contrast, in the diaspora, there is a possibility of error. Like when God's presence is not right before us, we could make an error. And there's this sage's teaching. It's called Avodah Zarah 8a, and this is in Gemara. And it's like, when we worship false entities or put our hopes in things that are not really existent. God protect us from this, that Jews that we're living in this diaspora, being separated from this area where godliness is perhaps a little bit more revealed, even in concealment. Worshippers of false deities and purity. So, as explained in the sources, the intent of the sage's teaching is that outside of Eretz Israel, divine beneficence passes through many intermediaries, and it's very difficult to avoid attributing a certain measure of importance to them, which we all fall short of, and thinking that it's our efforts that do it, and how it could be revealed to us so plainly or not. We think that an agent or intermediary, and similarly our man's abilities and our inherent qualities, which mamish God has given us. That this is the intent of the Talmud statement in Tanis Tene, that he provides water for the diaspora via an agent. In other words, the natural order. This applies even regarding the kindnesses and beneficences from those keys which were not entrusted to agents. So in the diaspora, this existence that we have as children of God outside of the land of Israel, even the beneficence that comes from these keys, it's transmitted via this agent, if you will, or this apparent more concealment of lacking to be able to see, because there are other ways in which we perceive these blessings, and these are significant factors in determining one's prosperity. From this, we can understand the concepts under discussion that the idea for the key for rain, which also includes sustenance, was not entrusted to an agent, that in truth a person's entire livelihood comes solely from God in a manner that no entity other than him has any significance whatsoever. This includes even the conduits within nature that a person implies, through which he is able to derive his sustenance from God. And we've talked about how when we have trust in God, and betachin, it's like someone who's in a God forbid, in a jail cell. Inside of there, he believes and trusts in nothing than he who has the key to get him outside of there. And as we live our lives, we should only focus on God to be able to know that he has the key, and focus on he who is able to affect these things. In the book of Psalms 104:21, man goes out to his work, to his labor until evening, i.e., he goes out to pursue his livelihood. According to this mindset, why does a man go out to work? Solely to fulfill God's command, as it's written in the book of Deuteronomy 15, chapter 18th verse. Commenting on that verse, Sifri says, should a person remain inactive? The Torah teaches us in all that you do, implying that man must do. We also learn in the Perki Avos to love work, and that for us to have a true godly experience in this world, we need to combine these godly abilities in prayer and study with an occupation. For all one way or all the other way leads us to a path which is not beneficent or beneficial to our existence. God will bless you in all that you do. 6 days you shall work and perform all labors, according to Exodus 20, chapter 9th verse. He works for his livelihood only because God desires that man provides conduits for the blessings that he gives. Furthermore, the person's recognition is twofold. A, he appreciates that the essence of the beneficence comes solely from above. It is the blessings of God that bring wealth, as we learn in the book of Proverbs, 10th chapter, 22nd verse. And all his actions are merely conduits to receive God's blessings. They resemble the oil and containers, this Elisha, and 2 Kings 4th chapter verses 2-7, and asked the widow of Avadia, who was in the state of abject poverty, what was left in her home, and she replied that she possessed only one flask of oil. So Elisha instructed her to gather as many containers as she could find and start pouring oil into them. And the oil from that small flask kept flowing until all the containers were fulfilled. And afterwards, he told her to sell the oil and live on the proceeds. And that's what we have to do. God help us to be able to take that little bit that we have in our life and pour into the containers, and then be able to convert that in a way, and God show us godliness through our business and through our transactions, and that we not fall simply into these things and understand them as a almost a remedy, but a resemblance of godliness in our life, where we may not be able to see it, but through these sustenance and real life items, God is like actually revealing himself to us, as we may think it's mundane. So they resemble the oil and containers that Elisha advised the widow of Avadia to employ when working the miracle, i.e., they were merely conduits to convey and contain the miraculous oil. Just one moment, please. I don't have the mute button, so just one moment, please. Be right back with you. It's like let me see if I can get the number. It's like, it's a little. Let let me get the number. Let me try to get it right now. Hold on, Papa. Sorry. 1 minute. Ay, ay, ay. Coming right now. Coming right now. 6741. Yes, it's like in that. Uh, oh no. Oh man. No, I looking. It maybe is the wrong number. Hold on, let me check. Sorry, compa. It's like back off the street a little bit. It's like a big building, and there's like one. I'm trying to figure. I gotta try to send you one picture, maybe. Here's one picture. I'm gonna send it to your phone right now. Hopefully you can see this. Oh man. I'm gonna send you the picture. It's on the same side as Imperial. I'm gonna send you. It's like a little bit further. I'm gonna send you the picture right now. Here it is. Hold on. It's no. It's at 7th Street in Glendale. Lo siento. Hold on. They must be back. I sent in a picture right now. Okay, look on the picture, compa. I just sent it right now. In the mensajes. You take me a picture? Yeah. Check the messages. Okay, thank you. And then call me back if you can't see it. You're going to be able to see it now very easy. Okay, we were holding by the psalmist and Psalms 104, 21. So we appreciate that the essence of the beneficence comes solely from above and is the blessings of God that bring wealth. And his actions are merely what we were talking about in the book of Proverbs, 10th chapter, 22nd verse. And all his actions are merely conduits to receive God's blessings. They resemble the oil and containers at Elisha when we were talking about in 2 Kings. Advised the widow of Avadia and the way that she handled this. And, as we were talking about that, we spill ourselves into each other, and we have the story of Hanukkah and this oil in this miraculous way, and how all of us have this, and that be the conduits. The second way, a person with such a mindset employs do not have any importance in and of themselves. He does not employ them as conduits or vehicles to convey and contain God's blessing because he thinks that they can independently elicit or facilitate divine generosity. He employs them only because of God's command. And this is the level by which we're trying to elevate. As such, they become entirely secondary to and merely a conduit for God's blessings, which surpass the natural order entirely, and he does not attribute any inherent importance to the activities he performs to receive these blessings. Okay. How important is nature? Number 5, the above recognition can follow either two modes, either of these two modes. Look at the Sichos, volume 18, pages 295 and A person's actions in the garments within the natural order that he employs are considered of no importance at all, just as in a miraculous series of events it is patently evident and apparent that the laws of nature are of no substance at all. So too, in the very same way, can that truth be recognized even when God's beneficence is conveyed through the garments of nature. The sustenance man derives is essentially miraculous, just like the manna that descends from heaven, saying two positive intents that a person should have while carrying out his business affairs, even in this moment right now, is to entreat God for mercy, that he sends forth his kindness. God, please treat me with mercy, that your kindness has come above. God, treat us with mercy, that your kindness has come above. And B, while involved in his business affairs, he should have the intent and belief that the beneficence of God's blessings, which he receives through his work, resemble other overt miracles like the descent of the manna, like when the bread came every day from heaven. So the continuation of these statements in that source, it is only that he creates a garment because this is the sublime will, can be interpreted as referring to the two ways to regard the natural conduits one employs discussed in the main text. Sure hope the mic is back on too. I think we are good, but so from heaven, and B, although a person's actions in these conduits, how important is that nature and the natural order which he utilizes have no importance and of themselves and are being employed only because of God's command. Nevertheless, because of God's command, they acquire a certain import, for God's will is carried out through them. And stated somewhat differently, the person's faith in everything that comes solely from God is absolute without any doubt whatsoever. As a result, he has complete trust that God will give him everything from his full, open, holy, and abundant hand. This patach ashidecha from, and also we see in our grace after meals, many of us may have a procedure for where we give thanks to God before our food. But as Jews, then we have the biblical commandment to bench and say thanks to the Lord God, even in the midst of that. And as we're preparing in this month of Elul, for many of us, some may not be familiar with the concept of even praying before a meal, and those who do it that way, lahavdil, but the blessing that's said before the food and then even after the food, as we all know how to bench, but sometimes that God should remove that ability from us where we maybe not. This piece of us, sometimes as Jews, we don't want to even wash or eat a piece of bread because we don't want to be responsible for the blessings that are after, and how that conduit can be open to us if we just, all that we do, if we just eat a piece of bread, especially on Shabbat day. And benching and saying these blessings in this unique way that God allows us to see manifestation in our life. He is also conscious that God commanded him to perform certain actions within the natural order to bring his blessings to fruition. Moreover, he realizes that his necessity for him to make a natural conduit stems from a specific divine intent that he know and recognize that not only the beneficence granted him, but also the natural order of itself and man's actions within it come from God. So in other words, God's intent is that we create this dwelling for him, this dira bitactonium, in this lowest realm. That is his intent in structuring the world in such a way that we must employ these natural means to earn a livelihood. In this way, we recognize that even the workings of what appears to be nature are godly in origin. He is also conscious that God commanded him to perform certain actions within the natural order to bring his blessings to fruition, and moreover, he realizes that this necessity for him to make a natural conduit stems from a specific divine intent that he know and recognize that not only the beneficence granted him, but also the natural order itself and man's actions within it come from God. So it can be said that this is the difference between the two perspectives, whether the key of sustenance is considered a key in its own right or whether it is included in the key of rainfall. Now, according to Rabbi Yochanan, rain is also sustenance, meaning that all the garments of nature and man's activities within them have no significance in and of themselves at all. And Rabbi Yochanan's perspective teaches that the sustenance and all man's efforts to acquire it are merely details in the beneficence that God grants man. In the West, in Eretz Yisrael, they say the key of sustenance is also in God's hands. That is written, saying, you open your hand. The perspectives of the scholars of Eretz Yisrael is that man's activities in making natural conduits are significant. These conduits also come from God and have their own importance. This, that the garments of nature and man's activities within them are not something that have no sustenance, but they are also significant entities that come from God. And is also important for man to know and recognize. This recognition leads to the awareness that even the lowest dimensions of material existence, those which appear naturally, are godly. Now, what's in the name? Number 6, based on the above, the connection between the sages whose differing opinions are mentioned in their respective statements also become clear in the Talmud and Gemara. Barachos 57a relates if one sees Yochanan in a dream, wondrous miracles, this Nasim, will be performed on his behalf, just as a name with one nun, this Hebrew letter, indicates a miracle. Nes, Gadol Hayapod, Asher, a name with more nunim, these nun, indicates a multitude of miracles. May we be able to see that nun because he is associated with miracles. Rabbi Yochanan maintains that sustenance is included in rainfall, and since his personal spiritual level was one of wondrous miracles, when viewing every entity in this world, he would perceive it as solely a miraculous matter. This defines the approach of wondrous miracles, that miracles are not confined to matters that involve the overt disruption of the natural order. Instead, Rabbi Yochanan's perspective was such that even when viewing nature, he saw that inwardly it is nothing but a series of miracles from above. By contrast, in the West, sages counted the key of sustenance as an independent key, and then the West refers to a specific place in the world. Let's conclude quickly. Our sages' statement: the divine presence is in the West. True, the entire earth is filled with his glory. And our sages say there is no place devoid of him, for the entire existence of space is subsumed with godliness, as we spoke about, inside and out, and revealed and not revealed, and in all-encompassing and divine transcendence as well. Nevertheless, the divine presence is in the West, in this location of Eretz Israel, and the very existence of that place conveyed godliness. Therefore, the scholars of the West maintain that even the garments of natural order, sustenance, are distinct manners held in God's hand, and the vitality that the CHASSIDUS and the CHASSIDUS is infusing right now is that in most years, this Chai Elul, the birthday of the two great luminaries, the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, which is very close to us right now, being the 13th, as we're celebrating the wedding of the Frierdiker Rebbe, falls in over the week or on the Shabbos of this Parshas Ki Tavo, where we're at right now, and it's blessed within those days, and these 3 days, and they correspond to these characteristics, to the two approaches of divine service that the Baal Shem Tov brought about, this revelation of the teachings of Chassidus as a whole, and the Alter Rebbe brought about the revelation of the teachings of Chassidus Chabad. And I am my beloved, and my beloved is mine. This Ani Ladodi Vadodi Li, and the Baal Shem Tov bring of the first fruits, and the new dimension brought out by the Baal Shem Tov through the teachings of Chassidus as a whole, involved adding vitality of a general encompassing nature into the observance of the Torah and its mitzvahs. For this reason, one of the subjects emphasized by the teachings of Chassidus as a whole is faith, as reflected by the verse in Chabacha 2:4, that a righteous man will live by his faith, by revealing, the teachings of Chassidus, Chabad. The Alter Rebbe continue to enhance the teachings of Chassidus as a whole, revealed by the Baal Shem Tov. We're going to have to go here. By doing so, he brought about a new development. So not only did his teachings make it possible for the essential elemental power of faith to be felt and internalized within the intellectual powers of Chachma, Bina, Da'as, but also that the influence of the faith on the intellectual powers will bring about a completely new and independent development. The existence of the intellectual powers of this Chachma, Bina, and Das within the person's soul would be solely the comprehension of godliness, and similarly, regarding the feelings in a person's heart, the intent is not merely that the essential power of faith be revealed within them, and in such an instance, the person's feelings are subordinate to his faith, and they function merely as elements that reflect the revelation of faith, and it becomes the very existence of this love of God and this fear of God, and it parallels the revelation of divine unity as made known by the Baal Shem Tov, and it was drawn down and revealed by the Alter Rebbe, and the Baal Shem Tov introduced the awareness that there is nothing aside from him, according to the book of Deuteronomy 4, chapter 35th verse, that there is no existence other than God, and this led to the parallel feeling regarding one's divine service, that divine service, our avodah, have no importance in all that we do. The revelation of faith within our soul that is possessed by every Jew because of his soul, which transcends the mortal dimensions. The Alter Rebbe revealed the oneness of God, even as it is manifest from the perspective of the world. And not only does the existence of the world not represent hey, hook it up. Thank you. Good for you. Of a contradiction to God's oneness, but the world enables a deeper conception of God's oneness, that the very existence of the world is one with God, is explained at length in Tanya and Shire Hayikod Vaha Muna. And a corresponding conception exists regarding man's divine service. Not only are all the powers of his soul aligned with and guided by the essential power of faith in God and his oneness, but that becomes his mind's entire being in his mind and fills the oneness of God as a result of his own. And the mind does not function or see itself as an entity separate from God, but it as an expression of him, and similar concepts apply regarding all the powers of his soul, and the possibility of a person's conscious powers to function as expressions of godliness can only come about through man's own toil and labor as he works with his own energy to comprehend and grasp God's oneness within his mind and even within the intellectual powers of his animal soul through meditation. This recognition will also be drawn down to his emotional qualities, the love of God and the fear of God that he feels will be an expression of the essential godliness of his soul, and simultaneously reflect the natural function of the emotions in his heart. The same is true regarding all the powers of the soul. It will become evident and apparent that the true existence of every power within his soul is fundamentally godly, spreading the well springs of this Baal Shem Tov outward. And the phrases that are there that represent that, and this message conveyed by Mashiach to the Baal Shem Tov, as recorded in this well-known letter, that at this time of Mashiach is when this comes out, and this well springs go outwards, primarily achieved through drawing down these well springs into the intellectual power of one's soul through the teachings of CHASSIDUS Chabad, which we are learning right now. Thank you, God. From the mind, they are drawn down into the emotions, and then, since the heart imparts vitality to all the organs, they affect the full range of one's personality. These efforts will lead to the spreading of these well springs to the world at large, and ultimately to you right now, and to the swift and imminent coming of Mashiach. I'm Yisrael Boykin here in Phoenix, Arizona. Thank you for joining. Thank you for subscribing. And success in all that you do. And may you see revealed godliness. L'chaim, l'chaim, for blessing and peace.